my name is Nemo, in case you were unfamiliar with who I am. Well, then now you know. Today is going to be another deck build, building the decks, deck tech, or any such thing, etc. And voila. Why? What? Why voila? I don't know, but yeah, another deck build. And I missed it. Alright, Pack Instinct is the deck for today. And yeah. Alright, so before I start going over this, I think the best way to do this deck, the way I built it, was to start with the 5 and 4 drops. Because when I looked at this deck at first, I was like, yeah, those 5 drops, all of them seem really good. And I figured that the key to figuring this deck out is to figure out which 5 drops I want to run. So that's what I did first. So, and let's go to the 5 drops then. So, Ant Queen is a great card, but, well, really the thing with these 5 drops, Garruk's Pack Leader, Ant Queen, Indrik Stomphowler, and Sentinel Spider, they're all really good. Obvious includes are Vorapede and Predatory Rampage. Predatory Rampage is a much better card than you'd think, by the way. I know it's no overrun, but this card does work. It's really good. If the opponent has to block, they lose all the guys pretty much. So it's a green Wrath God, pretty much. Your guys are going to be bigger than theirs, so if they're forced to block, then that means their guys die, you know? That's the idea behind it, and it works really well. But just imagine that all your big, huge guys are taunting elves all of a sudden, you know? What happens when you have a giant growth or something and you put it on taunting elf, and they're forced to block it? Well, they lose their guy. And that is really good, isn't it? Well, just imagine that all these huge guys in this deck suddenly become taunting elves. Yeah, I know that's crazy. It's really good. So that's why I run Predatory Rampage. So then it's like, which of these 5 drops do I really want to run? There are way too many of these. I definitely don't want to run that many. So in the end, I figured that for as much as they do on the board, each of these, like in testing, I figured that there's not too much difference between these guys, because they're all big 5 drops, they're all just one more creature, and there isn't really much difference between a 4/4 and a 5/5 at that point, just not in how this deck plays out. So then it's like, well, it's all about their abilities, you know. And Garruk's Pack Leader is a good card. I really like it, but the thing I have against it is that it's a turn 5 guy that then this might just be the last guy in your hand, especially with, like, the format is so much different from 2012 in this one, and you can't just rely on just card advantage stuff to work for you as well as it did in 2012, and it's not going to, because if this is your only guy, it doesn't do much if he's the only guy on the field. You have to draw another dude for him to become useful. So that's why I mean, Garruk's Pack Leader is still great, but that's the thing I have against him. You have to draw another guy before he's useful. And there's a lot of non-guys. It's actually only 61% creatures in a green deck, so the way I've set it up now. So yeah. And then there's Ant Queen, which just doesn't fit this deck, because it's all about big, huge, giant green dudes. So why would I need 1/1s in this deck? There's nothing that boosts my 1/1s aside from Predatory Rampage, or just putting a boost, one card on a 1/1. Like, there's nothing that boosts my whole side. So there's no need for Ant Queen in this deck. So that's the easiest choice here. This is the weakest one. Although it is a 5/5 and the rest are 4/4s, but still, that's the easier choice there. And then it's do I need Sentinel Spider? And yeah, this guy does have reach. But the way this deck plays out is that you're really dealing a lot of damage, and you don't have to really be scared of the opponent blocking you if you've got it set up right. So I'm not too worried about flyers really with this deck. And besides that, I do have removal in this deck. Like, it's not a traditional green deck that doesn't have any removal. I've got Prey Upons, and I've got this Ulvenwald Tracker. So I can deal with flyers that way. And this guy, also Master of the Wild Hunt, great guy. So I can deal with flyers by just killing them. I don't need vigilance particularly, and the reach is most of the time is just, it's nice. I'm not, don't get me wrong, this is a great guy, but the way this deck plays out, the reach is usually not that interesting, because I'm all about killing them before they get to drop something huge or whatever, you know. So this deck does play out very aggressively like that, and that's why I have Indrik Stomphowler, because if it doesn't matter that much which of these I get, I might as well choose to get the one that is the only one that can deal with artifacts and enchantments, right? So that's why I'm running Indrik Stomphowlers. So once I made that choice, and I pretty much, as you can hear already, I'm pretty much made the choice to be pretty aggressive with this deck already. However, even when I didn't, I already figured out that well, the 4-drops were the second thing I wanted to figure out. So obviously you include Chameleon Colossus because he's insane, and little trick with this guy, he counts as a wolf, so he works with Master of the Wild Hunt. And Master of the Wild Hunt is another obvious include. Look at these. I never noticed that, but this is a real nice drawing of wolves, by the way, here. Impressive. Anyways, so, and obviously you also include Obstinate Baloth. These three are just obvious includes. There's no choice there, you just put them in the deck and end of story. So then it's like, there's a lot of 4-drops. Which of these am I gonna run? There's the Wild Heart Invoker. There's this thing which is crap and I already know I don't want. There's Vanguard Firstborn, which I guess combos with End Queen, but I already decided not to run End Queen. And then after that, his ability is good, but I figured out that in this deck it doesn't really belong. It doesn't do enough. So yeah, and Wild Heart Invokers weren't good enough for me either. So as you can hear, that's the choice. The Primal Huntbeast really surprised me. They were much better than I expected them to be. Just having hexproof. I mean, this is a 4-drop 3/3, and that seems bad, doesn't it? That seems bad to me. I know that in ages past, like, he's a hill giant, right? So I know that in older Magic formats, he wouldn't seem so bad. But in this, I grew up with this kind of format where everything is at least equal to its casting cost in power and toughness, and this guy is weaker than that. But just the hexproof is so amazing in this deck, because as you can see, I'm also running these Blanchwood Armors. I'm running, you know, Primal Bellows. I'm running all sorts of stuff that if they can kill the guy I enchanted with, then they 2-for-1 me. So if I get a hexproof dude, then I can safely put it on there, and they can't 2-for-1 me that way, and I'm good, you know. So that's why this guy is great. But aside from that, that's not the only reason I put him in the deck, because I was deciding between the 4-drops before I even decided to put in, like, for instance, Blanchwood Armor. But really, the reason is that if I'm gonna be behind, which I was with my testing a lot at first, because now I built the deck to be a lot more aggressive, but at first I was getting behind a little bit, and you know, just being able to drop a guy that is guaranteed to be able to block goblins, for instance, because he has hexproof, is just so important. Because if they can kill your guy and still be attacking, then by turn 4, and you still haven't got a guy in the field, then you're in a lot of trouble. So just having a guy that is assured to stay on the table was really what I needed at turn 4, and that's why I mostly decided for this guy. But now that I'm running it more aggressively, he's still really good, because you can put all your buffs on him and they can't kill him. So, and Timbermaw Larva just has such a big impact. They pretty much have to deal with this guy. He doesn't have trample, but come on, he gets so big. He's just silly. He's at least gonna be attacking for 6. So just from the fact that he has such a board presence, I have to include this guy. And those are my 4-drops that I chose to include. And from there, when I knew the 4-drops and the 5-drops I wanted to include, Saikon, I'm sorry I'm recording. You know what? Let's tell him. So yeah, those are the 4 drops I decided to include, and from there it was a lot easier to figure out this deck once you had that down. So let's go back to the beginning, I guess, and start from there. So obviously I want as much removal in this, so all the Prey Upons and the Ulvenwald Tracker is in there. Primal Bellow is also just something you want to include. It deals so much damage. Fog is something I didn't want, didn't need. Like, I've run this card in 2012 when I ran the Elves Mono Green, because that deck was really just all it had was it didn't have any sort of removal, and if you don't have any sort of removal in your entire deck, then you're just racing the opponent. Well, so in the end, this deck does have a lot of removal, and that's why I don't need Fog, because this isn't just a race, so I can control the opponent a little bit. So that's why it's not needed. And then let's move on to the Emerald Medallions, which I'm not running because I'm running Nature's Lore instead. There's just no need for these Emerald Medallions. The one time where Emerald Medallion is kind of cool is when you drop an Emerald Medallion and then you play Nature's Lore, but compared with having 2 Nature's Lores. Okay, let's think about this, right? So let's say I have 3 mana. I play a Nature's Lore, then I'll have 2 mana open after that, so I can play my second Nature's Lore. Let's say at 3 mana I play an Emerald Medallion, I'll have 1 mana open, and I can play my second Nature's Lore. So that doesn't matter that much there. The only way it matters is if you have Emerald Medallion on the field, and then the next turn you're gonna play Nature's Lore. Then it's slightly better than if you would have played 2 Nature's Lores in separate turns, I guess. But so that might be a reason to include 1 Emerald Medallion instead of Nature's Lore. On the other hand, this does give the opponents more targets for their artifact removal, so that's something to consider there. I mean, if they have artifact removal, they can't get rid of your land, but they can get rid of your artifact. So I don't think there's enough upside. It's like you would almost call it a theoretical advantage. By having 1 Emerald Medallion in there instead of a Nature's Lore. So, like, nah, whatever. And plus, if you're running Vinelash Kutsu, that's another reason not to run Emerald Medallion, because the Vinelash Kutsu gets bigger. Every time a land enters the battlefield, and Emerald Medallion doesn't give you land, but Nature's Lore does. So, but I'm not running Vinelash Kutsu because I have 4 Garruk's Companions, and these guys have Trample, and Trample is pretty big game in this deck. You've got a lot of boost stuff, so if you can give a guy with Trample boost, they'll want to trade this against this with their 2/1s or the 2/2s, and then you just play a Primal Bellow to save it. But that doesn't just save it, that just deals a lot of damage to their face as well, because the guy has Trample. And you can't do the same with Vinelash Kutsu, and you know, all the boost is kind of wasted on guys that don't have Trample. In comparison, I mean, they're not totally wasted, but still, I mean, this Trample is just so big game for this deck that obviously, to me, Garruk's Companion is much better than Vinelash Kutsu, and I don't need another 2 drops, so meh, I'm not running Vinelash Kutsu for that reason. Lightning Greaves is amazing. If you don't get it, well, I just talked about how good Hexproof was, so I shouldn't actually have to explain this more, but this gives you the guy's Shroud. You can equip it to 0. If you ever tap out, then they can face a hasted Primordial Titan, or Primordial Hydra, or whatever. You know, it's just crazy how dangerous that thing gets, and how quickly that thing gets dangerous. So, as you can see, this is counted as a 2-drop, but I count it as a 3-drop because that's the first turn I'm gonna be able to play it, and that's usually the turn I play it because I don't have that much 3-drops. So the fact that this guy comes in as a 1/1, that's okay. I'll have plenty to do on turn 4 and turn 5 most of the time, so if I'm not playing anything turn 3, then I'd rather just drop the Primordial Hydra at that turn. Of course, you don't do this against like Born of Flame or Black deck, because you know they've got stuff that can deal with 1 toughness stuff, so you don't want to have your Primordial Hydra die to that. But in like a matchup against blue, if they're tapped out, then yeah, you'll play this on turn 3 and you'll be happy with it, you know. Anyways, Primordial Hydra is just a great card and is a big threat of itself. And I mean, as you can see, I'm not running any big 6-drops. That's because I decided that these Garruk companions are so strong, and I just decided early on that this deck works really well as a more aggressively low-cost creature deck. So the fact that I'm not running any 6-drops means that if I draw Primordial Hydra late, then that can be my 6-drop or higher, you know. So this guy kind of serves as a double role in that sense, that I can drop him early and have him be a growing threat, or I can drop him late and have him be an immediate threat later on. So, you know, that's all upside as far as I'm concerned. And then Blanchwood Armor, yeah, I know it's an aura, and I don't like auras that much because people can 2-for-1 you. But this deck, just if the opponent stepped out, then sometimes you don't even care if they 2-for-1 you the next turn. If you get in with this once, you're gonna deal so much damage that the opponent is gonna be on the defense. They're probably not gonna win anymore. So it does so much for you that the card disadvantage, the potential card disadvantage, doesn't matter that much. And the nice upside is there are a lot of hexproof guys in this deck, which works really well with Blanchwood Armor. So, you know, that's cool. And here's just such a hexproof guy, Dungrove Elder, one of the really powerful cards in your deck. And I mean, sometimes I'm a little bit sad this guy doesn't have trample, but then I remember this is a hexproof 3-drop that grows bigger over time. What am I complaining about? Let's move on. Leatherback Baloth, free cost 4/5. Heck yeah, that's in. Brindleboar, what the heck is this guy? I don't need to gain life, I'm aggressive. Cultivate is not needed because I'm not running anything huge, and Nature's Lore is better. I'm already running 4 Nature's Lores just because of how good Nature's Lore is, even though I'm not a complete rand deck anyways. But even if I'm not, then at least I know that Primal Bellow and Blanchwood Armor and such grow bigger from having more land, and also Dungrove Elder and stuff like that just is more powerful when I have more lands out. So even if I'm not gonna be running huge dudes, then Nature's Lore is still worth it as a 4-of in this deck. But Cultivate is not. Genesis Wave, every time I cast this spell I just get a bunch of lands and nothing else happens. So I decided that I don't want that. I get the theoretical thing though, because the thing is, if you drop this for 7 like, and you get 3 lands and nothing else, then or like 4 or 5 lands, then that means you would have been drawing all those lands the following turns, and you kind of got rid of all of those lands. So it helps you in your next couple of draws to draw another guy. But I don't know, because well, I mean, to draw another permanent, because this drops all the permanents. But I don't know, because I just want something big on the turn I would play this. You know what I mean? I don't want to help my future draw. I want to win the game as soon as possible. I don't want... Yeah, so I don't think that's needed in this deck. I already talked about these 4-drops. This thing is terrible. Like, what the hell? At first I thought it was like just tap and draw a card, and then I was like, well, maybe. But then I read, oh, you have to pay 4 when you draw as well. So I have to pay 8, and then I finally draw a card off this. Then it finally replaces this crappy card in my hand. And when am I gonna pay another 4? Never, because there's no chance that I'm ever gonna drop 12 mana into this stupid artifact so I can actually get some upside from it. Like, what? No, that's not gonna happen. Maybe if you drop this real late and you're in an impasse, but come on now, seriously. Let's be real. That's just not gonna happen. I hate that stupid artifact. It's terrible. Bountiful Harvest is the 5-cost sorcery that gains you a bunch of life. Like, what? Incremental Growth. Now, I'll give you the fact that it's better than Incremental Blight, but it's still pretty crappy when you compare it to stuff like Predatory Rampage. So no thanks. And in even earlier cards like, you know, Blanchwood Armor. Primal Bellow, like, what? Why would I need incremental growth when I got these kind of cards? So I already talked about all these 5 drops. Now we get to all the 6 drops and the 7 drops and the 8 drops. Yeah. Why I'm not running any of these? Well, because I didn't need to. This deck is so fast, man. It runs really good the way it is here, and I never really like. This comes down turn 6 at the earliest, but it's mostly gonna be turn 8 or something when you finally have your 6 mana, and then the turn after that, like turn 9, is when it finally attacks. You don't need that much turns to win with this deck, so you don't need these kind of cards. Now, Primordial Titan is the best one of these 6 drops. Because if you were running other Titan or other 6 drops that come in and immediately do something, immediately have an effect on the board, rather than just being able to attack the following turn, then it would be nice to have Primeval Titan, because this thing also comes in and immediately does something, namely giving you more land. But if you don't need that land because you're not running anything that is higher than, that costs more than the Primeval Titan itself, and only one card, this one, that costs the same amount, then you don't need Primeval Titan, do you? Because the thing it does when it comes into play, namely giving you land, is needed. So yeah, one thing I'll give Primeval Titan is that it works really well with when you get to attack. You can also Primal Bellow. The thing has trample and it gives you land, so Primal Bellow is going to do more damage. So that's pretty much a match made in heaven, those two. But you know what? That's not enough for me to consider including it. And Rampaging Baloth is a 7 drop, even though it costs 6, because you're gonna drop this to when you have an extra land in hand. So you're gonna drop this and then immediately land, so you get your 4/4 before they're able to kill this guy. And then there's stuff like Avenger of Zendikar, which is worse than Howl of the Night Pack, so there's no need to run it. And Boundless Realms, what is this? I don't understand this card. Like, why do I need more mana? Why do I need so much mana? What is this for? There's no 10 drop in this deck. The highest I've got is 8. What? I mean, yeah, it fixes, like, it gets all the lands out of your deck so that you can then start drawing other stuff. But again, that's too late, and I don't really need incremental advantage like that if it doesn't also do something else. So and then there's Howl of the Night Pack. Like, this card is probably the best one out of these big drops, and I did win the game with that. You're gonna see it, I think. So it's a good card. Don't get me wrong, but again, I don't need a 7-cost drop. Yeah, but I really like Howl of the Night Pack though. But it just doesn't fit this deck, because this deck doesn't need all this big stuff. It can win way earlier than that. Biorhythm, yeah. It works really well with trample, because you just trample over the guy. Like, if your guy have trample, then they can't. They're dead if you play this, But that's and if you have more guys than they have, but you're not gonna have more guys than they have unless you completely focus on using Ant Queen or something like that. But yeah, anyways. So that works well with the Ant Queen and with your trample guys, but other than that, no. And it's an 8 drop. I don't need to win the game at 8. And besides, I already like Epic Proportions does more for me than Biorhythm, because this wins me the game turn 6 when I play this. Like, this doesn't need to untap, or I don't need to untap with it. I don't need to wait a turn before I can attack with this. This thing gives a huge dude. I already have trample and +5/+5. Pretty much, I can swing in for a win at that point. And if I do it on one of my hexproof guys, then it can't even respond to it. And yeah, let's talk about Epic Proportion. I was gonna save this for last, but while I'm talking about it, let's talk about it, I guess. So, yeah, I'm sure you guys are confused about this card being in there, but trust me, when you have the deck set up this way, then Epic Proportions really wrecks people. I wasn't running this card. Again, let's talk about the Elf deck, I guess, because Fog was in there and Epic Proportions was in there. Okay, so I wasn't running Epic Proportions in the Elf deck because the Elf deck was a bunch of 1/1s in the previous game. But in this game, and I feel that a lot of people are running Epic Proportions in this game because they figured out in 2012 that it's a bad card. But in this game, in this deck it's really good because all you guys are already huge and giving them trample. Guess what? That's great. That's really good. So yeah, in there, and this is my only 6-drop because it does something the turn I play it. Because it, and every other thing from 6 mana and higher doesn't. I have to wait a turn, and that's not good enough for me. So yeah. And then there's Chameleon Hydra, which I'll admit can be, you know, can cost less than 8, but I always, if there's a card that has a potential downside, then I really need that card to be really good, or I won't run it, because potential downsides are really, I always shy away from them. If there's gonna be a card that isn't always good, then I'm really wary of running a card like that. And Chameleon Hydra is such a card, because if I really don't, if he's able to deal with all my guys, then I want another guy that I can drop. But Chameleon Hydra then costs 8 mana, and I won't be able to drop it until I have 8 mana. That could be too late at that point. So, like, he's good if you're already got a bunch of guys on the field. But if you got a bunch of guys, what? If you got a bunch of guys on the field, then you're probably winning anyway, and you don't need him. So, and then there's Verdant Force. What? Okay, cool story, bro. Don't need it. So that's the deck, and yeah, there's a little dip here in the free mana, but as I said, these two are actually free drops most of the time, Primordial Hydra, so that kind of accounts for that. And you can play 2 Nature's Lores, or a Nature's Lore and another Garruk's Companion turn 3. So you've got plenty of things to do in turn 3, even if it's not just a straight up free drop card. So that's a deck, and this runs really well and really aggressively. And I wanted to give these big guys a chance because it's a green deck, and you know, it feels wrong to play a green deck and not even have 6 drops. But this is just the way the deck runs best to me. So I'm gonna take it the way it runs best, and you guys are gonna see a gameplay, a video coming up probably the same day this deck build goes live, because the expansion is coming out pretty soon. 5 new decks, all based around Ravnica Guild, so that's gonna be cool. And my name has been Nemo, my name will still be Nemo in the gameplay video. See you guys then.